that's true. Naked Palpatine.
Oh, you pick that one. Fresh out of the clone tank, nude Palpatine is my
Well, that's the first thing I think of when you say Dark Empire Palpatine.
Hello everyone, and welcome back. Oh my goodness, another nerve-wracking thing again. But we are here with Book 2 of the EDAN trilogy by Philip Chase, who's an amazing YouTuber. I don't know why you're watching this if you haven't watched my video on part 1 on the Way of Edan by Philip Chase. Because this is book 2, and like, you're silly, because why would you read about book 2 or listen about book 2 if you haven't listened to book 1? But anyway, safe to say, I am talking about the second book by Philip Chase today, who is a YouTuber who, if you are not subscribed to, well, I probably tagged him in the description, so you should definitely go give him a subscription, because he's way smarter than me, he dresses better than me, and he talks about things in a way more sophisticated way than I do. But yeah, we have the Prophet of Edan, which is pretty much right after. I mean, there's some time jumps happening in here, but still pretty much like right after the Way of Edan ends. And I'm trying to say non-spoiler wise, DayRaven is getting his training finally, to figure out this elf shard and deal with that. The war is coming to a head, in terms of, Emmeline. Well, Emmeline's all of it, but the Torlanders and all their allies versus the good guys. Bloodless furthering his religious fervor. I should say one thing. I don't want to say non-spoiler wise, but one person we meet that I imagine will probably be bigger in the next book, but we shall see. I have some predictions. Munzel, who's one of these tribesmen, who does not like the Siltharin. They're not fans of them because they enslave their people. The Siltharins enslaved a lot of the tribes people, the Alarsh, I think is what they're called. Yes. And so they want revenge, so they join the Torlanders. And of course the book ends in a certain way, but they're still around, so I imagine they'll play a bigger role in 3. They very much, they give me those sort of like barbarian vibes. If you need your Conan vibe or your Karsa vibe, you get it through here. Though we don't spend enough time with them to really dive into them too much. I should also say, like, this feels like the big finale. Like, if you for some reason thought the first book started off a bit slow, I feel like this book is kind of like pretty fast paced throughout. I mean, there's not action scenes every 2 seconds, but it definitely, it's a longer book, but I felt like it went by quicker. I don't know if that makes sense. I also think this is just a better book. I think it just builds upon everything the first book did, and just keeps rolling with it, and is overall even better. Which I'm excited to read the third book to see if that one's even better than this one. But I guess we'll have to wait and see. But there's a lot going on here. Minor gripes, I will say. I still, and again, this is me looking for things. And the problem is, too, with me saying that this is a problem, is if I did write something, it would probably be the exact same way. But there are still those times. I think it's done a little bit better here in terms of not being as noticeable. But there's still times where somebody's talking to somebody else, right? They're having a normal conversation, and then a couple paragraphs of a lore dump, okay? Here's some exposition. And it's just kind of always noticeable when it happens, but I think it also does a better job of, like, being worded in a way where it's like, well, now it makes sense why they're having this big exposition dump. But, like, sometimes, like, the war's about to happen. I think there's a particular spot in Astrolad where there's somebody, I forget who now, but they're going on the spiel about, like, the history of Astrolad or something like that. And I'm like, okay, but we got, like, what, like a week or less till things hit the fan, can we like not waste time with this and just focus on the training or whatever? It is little things like that. Where like, well, I mean, one, it's world building, and we need that. And I mean, by the way, I've enjoyed living in this world or being in this world as I read it. So anytime there is a lore dump, I love reading it. I'm just saying, like, so that was a minor thing. Also, I, I love Norn. I think he's a really funny little dwarg man. He's a short king, just like I'm a short king. Actually, what was really funny, I hadn't gotten a chance to do my review yet. I just finished the book and went to work. I made a post on Instagram, but I texted Philip Chase, and he's kind enough to respond, which, oh my god, let me tell you, Philip Chase is the nicest guy on the planet. One of the nicest guys. Like, if you guys know me from Star Wars, you know Joe Bongiorno. Well, right next to him, you got Philip Chase. Nice dude. Anyway, so I told him, like, I got a flight, so hopefully I can read his book on the flight and finish it. Because it's going to be 5 hours from where I live to Dallas, Texas. And then from there, I'm going to go another 2 hours to get to Arkansas, where I'm meeting a friend of mine. But anyway, I haven't been on an airplane that often, right? So I kind of have this trepidation about going on it. Because, like, I'm surrendering complete and utter control to the pilot and in engineering, right? Like, in a car, like, you're more likely to get in an accident. Like, every day I go to work, I risk getting into a car accident, absolutely. But there's that sort of sense of control, right? Like, I feel like I have more control in my car. Even though sometimes things happen that you just have no control over. But I feel like there's this security blanket of I feel like I have control. There's a point to be made here. I have something to relate it to the book. But in an airplane, like, I just have to have faith. I surrender complete control to the person in charge. Like, if something goes wrong, that's it. So I texted Philip Chase about that, and I said, like, kind of reminds me of Norn, because Norn really hates boats. He hates being on boats. He just hates it. Would rather be on land. He does not like being on it, which he has to go on a boat a few times in this book, and I think it's really funny. But all that to go around to say, I think there was a lot of character stuff for Norn, I think, in the first book, and a lot of lore for the Dwarves in the first book. In this book, he honestly feels there's very much this Legolas and Gimli sort of feel between Orvindil, the giant, and Norn, where they're just like these two unlikely friends. Because remember, the Thaugs, or whatever you call them, they have this animosity toward the dwarves. So here we are with two people that should be enemies, but they're now friends, right? And they become really close friends. It's very similar to Gimli and Legolas. But it is a thing, though, like in the Peter Jackson films at least, where I love him in the Peter Jackson films, but I mean, he's just kind of like the funny dwarf who says funny things, right? He's like, you have my axe, and all that stuff. And it feels like Norn is kind of just a stereotype in this book, which, I mean, I'm not hating. He's probably some of the greatest moments of levity in this entire story, but he also, like, just doesn't get that much to do in terms of character stuff. I mean, he does a lot. Like, he's in a lot of the action scenes. He's around for a good portion of the book. I just feel like he doesn't get to shine as much as he did in the first book, which I guess makes sense, because he got a lot of time to shine in the first book. But I was just kind of disappointed with his I don't know, his lack of nuance. He's just kind of there to be the funny guy who helps out. And I love him for it. But he didn't do much, I guess I should say. And there wasn't much more built on his character beyond what we already had. Which is fine, but it's something I know. And those are my two little gripes. And again, these are me looking for things. Again, I overall think this is a fantastic book series. I think Philip Chase knocked it out of the park. I think he's super talented. And again, I'm not well versed in fantasy. I've only started to dip my toes in it with Malazan, but I think he's up there. I honestly do, And I would say also, one other gripe. I won't get into specifics because that's more spoiler centered, but there is a romance in this book, and this isn't really a knock against Philip specifically, because I also felt this way most of the time in Malazan. I don't feel Steven Erikson really did a good job either with this, which is the romance stuff. And like there's enough there for me to buy it being a thing, but I don't feel like there's enough in it either in order for me to feel it on an emotional level. I don't know if I was meant to, but I intellectually I'm like, yeah, I get why they're together. It makes sense. Like I don't have any issue with it. I don't think it's a problem with the book. I just also don't feel that. But then again, what do I know? I'm single, and so what do I know? What do I know? I literally, it's I can't say anything. So, um, but I didn't personally feel that connection that they supposedly felt. Other than that, though, I think the book is a standout. Um, Another thing that's not really an issue, it feels like a logical next step for Bloodlove, but Bloodlove just kind of becomes a villain. Like, there's no real nuance anymore. Like, there's a little bit of doubt in there, but I don't know. I don't know what I would have preferred. He just kind of becomes really focused, and just, I feel like all the nuance that was there kind of disappeared, which was kind of disappointing because I wanted to see him evolve more. I wanted to see more of a, not evolve, I should say. I wanted to see more of like, I don't know, like maybe right near the end, right before the life leaves his eyes, he has like a revelation, and he would like have this revelation of like, oh, I've been wrong, or something, or just something more than I think we were given. But that's fine. Um, Jarman also doesn't get too much to do in this book, but I imagine that's all saved for the next one. And then Archimald is just kind of he gets some. We'll talk about it in spoilers, but there's definitely direction being taken with him, so we'll see how that goes. But overall, this is the big finale. This is the Return of the King. This is the Crippled God. This is the finale. Um, the next book is going to be actually pretty unique in terms of, I think, most stories where what happens after the end. Basically, I mean, there's already stuff being set up at the end of this book to really show like, oh, it's not over. Like, there's still a lot more to, carry over. I mean, that's true of real life too, right? Like, once World War II ended, that wasn't the end of the story. There's still stuff going on. May have not been as big as what was going on, but there was still stuff going on that had to be addressed. But would that be interesting to see a movie about? Maybe not, But still, there's stuff that's going to be happening in the next book that will have repercussions because of this book. So that will be interesting to see, but that's another book entirely to discuss. Also, everything with the magic, we get a little bit more understanding of it. There definitely is a lot of Buddhist stuff in here. I said before Star Wars, which Philip Chase texted me privately about like how I was running the money with that, and definitely you definitely feel that in terms of everyone kind of being connected to this force, the force, um, and everyone being God in a sense, or everyone being a part of the universe, and the connections therein, even with animals and stuff. Um, Philip Chase might have to be careful. I might become a vegan if he keeps his cards up with this series, and I don't want to be. I'm just kidding. I mean, I do like me some steak. And maybe I'm a monster, but I do like me some steak. Um, Steak and broccoli, nice combo. Um, but I don't know if I could just eat fish, but that's just me. But there's a lot of stuff with there's a lot of dragons in this book, I should say. So if you wanted some more fantasy action like that, you get that here. But even with the dragons, there's a lot of nuance in terms of like they don't want to be here. Like they're all being controlled by magic. Like they'd rather just do their own thing. And I think that's really cool. I don't think you see that too much. Like in Malazan, we get like people that can shapeshift right into dragons, but we don't get a lot of like just dragons themselves, like just trying to live their best life. So I thought that was pretty cool. And I'm kind of mumbling to kind of avoid spoilers. So overall, I think it's a worthy sequel to The Way of Edan. I think if you enjoy The Way of Edan, you're gonna love The Prophet of Edan, personally. And I'm really excited to see how this all concludes. I'm gonna get into some spoilers. If you don't want any spoilers, probably time for you to go. But I will say, I think it's absolutely worth your time if you haven't read it. I know this is kind of old at this point. Not old, Came out a few years ago now, but I definitely think it's worth a read, so you should check it out. I'm gonna get into spoilers. If you don't want that, time for you to go. Okay? Alright. I think I did a terrible job organizing my non-spoiler thoughts on this book, but there you go. But for those of you who either don't care or have read it already, well, here we go. Immediately we begin with dragons attacking the castle, and the very opening pages is really cool. We get Sakura being Palpatine, throwing lightning. That was great. Imar, whatever you say his name, he jumps, he freaking stabs a dragon, alright, gets his hand burned. He gets all scaly armed. He gets like they call him Imar Silverhand, which made me think of Cyberpunk 2077. Keanu Reeves is in that game, and he plays Johnny Silverhand. So I thought that was just a little bit of a funny coincidence. It definitely, as soon as that word came up, it made me immediately think of, oh, it's Keanu Reeves in in fantasy. Even though I imagine Imhar is black, even though I don't think he was described that way. So I don't know what happened in my brain. Maybe he was. I don't know. But it was just a funny thing. I wrote faith, doubt, conviction, and fervor. I'm not exactly sure what I meant. I'm sure it had to do with Bloodla. But again, this is early on in the book. Bloodla is still doubting himself. You know, what if DayRaven lives? And I expected more. That's part of the thing I'm talking about. Like, I expected more from that when he realized that DayRaven was alive. You know, maybe really question his role that he's been pursuing. But that never really happens. He just kind of doubles down on his choices, which fair enough. DayRaven agrees to be trained, but at this point in the novel, he mainly wants to be normal again, if possible, which is the biggest hindrance to his growth, is his want to go back to normal. Men were the cruelest of animals was a quote. I don't remember what exactly is the context, but I apparently really liked it, so I wrote it down. King Bulk and Imhar are right early on. Oh, I remember now. So early on, King Bulk and Imhar they're in this like little village, and they're hiding from the Torlanders. And then the Torlanders come to the camp, and they're looking for Bulk, and they're looking for Imhar, and a couple others. And then we get this really, like, if this is me getting upset over this, I'm going to be miserable during Backer's books. But the Torlanders grab, like, this woman, start feeling her up, and what more do I need to be said? It was uncomfortable. It was uncomfortable to read, and I think that's where the quote comes from, that men were the cruelest of animals. I think that's why yeah, I think that's right. That's right. So that's why I wrote that down. I don't want to talk about it any further, but you get the gist. One of the most uncomfortable parts of the book for me was that section. We then also get introduced to Munzil, or Munzel, I don't know how you pronounce that. He's one of the tribesmen. He wants revenge on the Siltarans because I think, am I remembering correctly? His wife was raped, and I don't know if that was the same woman. It could be wrong. But we also deal with dead children in slavery, because Menzel, I think, was enslaved at one point, and also both of his children are dead. So he's a very depressing, sad character, filled to the brim with the need for revenge, which is why he plans on joining the Torlanders. He also feels like he got a vision from God to do so. So again, we also get things of different cultures in this book and different faiths, which, or at least a little bit of differences, which I think is really cool, because the first book felt very focused on one particular aspect. So here we get to see more of the world, and it was really cool. I'm assuming Manzil will be a much bigger character in the next book, but I want more from him because we didn't get too much in this book. Sorry, I have a couple pages of notes. Manzil wants to have an alliance between all tribes. That's like the big vision, so they can go up against the Silharans with the help of the Torlanders. Dalriana and Ovendil and Osenia. So this was a part, I forget if Orphandil was talking to Norn, or if he was talking to DayRaven. I forget the context of who or what, because it was a couple hundred pages ago since I finished this book. But there was, in fact, a nice little bit of backstory for Orphandil, which I really appreciated. Basically, him and like his best friend, there was this girl they really liked, and they both wanted to marry, and the girl kind of liked both of them, but they joked around about fighting each other to the death. They weren't going to actually do it. And she said, if any of you actually do anything like that and the other wins, like, none of you get to marry me then. Like, that's ridiculous. But one night they get really drunk and they don't really want to do it, but they made an honor-bound, like, promise, which, in their culture means you kind of have to follow through. So Orvendale ends up killing, like, his best bud. It might have been his brother or something. I kind of forget. But yeah, he kills his friend. So not only does he lose a good friend, he loses somebody he loved because he did that, and now he's alone. And I don't know, Orvendil, I enjoyed him in the first book, but it kind of did the opposite effect here. I talked about Norn early in the non-spoilers, and Norn got a lot of love in the first book and a lot of character development. And here, and Orvendil was just kind of there, right? This one, Norn's kind of taking the role of Orvendil, and Orvendil's getting more of the character growth here and fleshing out of his being, which, is a nice counterbalance, I suppose. We finally we meet back up with now Duke Imhar, because apparently off screen, or off the page, I suppose, his uncle died, which is sad. Munzil meets Bloodla, and he talks to him, and then later on Achenwald about joining forces, in which they do. We also have German in the Alarsh camp. This is another, probably one of my favorite parts of the book, because German is such an interesting, like, kind of, I don't know how to describe his character. He's very much like one of those conniving characters. He's a lot like, if you remember Littlefinger from Game of Thrones. He gives me a lot of those vibes. But it was interesting having his inner thoughts interspersed with how he talks to the natives of this place. I just think it was really fun. Sequara and Day bathroom shenanigans and bonding. I don't know what I meant by bathroom shenanigans. I assume this is where they finally started having romantic feelings. I don't remember. It's really funny how I wrote that down, though. But, so yeah, they're having a lot of bonding in this book because they're going to fall in love. This big spoiler that I didn't go into before. We also finally get to meet Galdor. I think it's really funny it took this long to meet the person that DayRaven was supposed to meet in the very first book and never did. But we meet him here, and Abon. We also meet Hildegarth and Edith. Which, this is also interesting in terms of... we'll get to that in a second. So, King Balch is eventually, he's caught by Archenwald and everything. And he gets thrown off a cliff. And then he gets eaten alive. It was a pretty rough scene. I felt really bad for him. But so, R.I.P. King Balch. So one thing, Harem NJs or something, I forget how his name goes. He really likes violence. Like he's quite sadistic. One of these like lesser priest mages, but he's weaker in magic. I just thought it was something interesting to note with the way the magic works in this world. Whereas Morcar is a bit more reviled by all the, like, when Balch gets thrown off the cliff, he's a bit more sickened by it. But while he's a bit more, repulsed by that sort of violence, he, out of the two of those mages, is the more powerful one. So I thought that was a little bit interesting. Also, we learned because of all the violence and stuff going on, and the animals they have to possess, or not possess, but kind of like control, that a lot of priests are going mad. Like, they're losing their minds trying to do this. And there's a more strategic area for the Torlanders to attack first, but Ledla suggests to Arkenwall to attack Astrolad first, because we got to destroy ideas that will really ruin morale. So, because Astrolad has a different faith than the Way. So, Bledla's idea is if we destroy Astrolad, then we destroy a lot of people's belief in this thing and their faith and their love of it, and kind of just destroy their morale, So that is something that they will end up doing in the following chapters. And a big thing in this book, especially because of the romance, but just in general, is detachment and empathy, which seems like an oxymoron, which was my note. But it's very similar to the Star Wars prequels, where you have this dogmatic religious sect. But it's a bit more positive here. But it's very much the same thing of, like, actually I think it's a lot better than the prequel Jedi, I'll say. But there's this thing of detachment, so you can't have too much attachment to the things of this world, right? Because you're this mage. You're meant to be beyond that, better than that. But on the other hand, it requires you to be empathetic to all life around you, right? So it feels like a bit of an oxymoron. But the way the book handles it, there is a bit of a nuance and an interesting way of how that actually functions, which I really like. But it is really interesting, because later on we'll see with, like, DayRaven and stuff, his love for Sequara and how that kind of grounds him, but him also being able to let that go in terms of, like, she may be in danger, like, right now, but that's not my priority. My priority is this. I can't deal with what's going on with her over here, but I can deal with this. So you kind of, like, let that go and just kind of involve yourself in everything else. Or you kind of let yourself go, I should say. Or at least DayRaven has to, because of the Elf Shard. But it is an interesting sort of dichotomy there, which I really enjoyed about it. But it is a bit, I imagine it's really hard to be detached while also being empathetic. But I really enjoyed that exploration, which I'm sure we'll get more of in the next book, and the book to come out in June, which by the time this comes out, it's after June, but okay. One thing. So there was a male god comment, which was actually pretty funny, got a chuckle out of me. I think it was Erd who talks about, like, you just think that, a lot of men think that, God's going to be a male or something like that, or it was way more beautifully written than how I'm, like, paraphrasing it. But it was a really funny little line. Though I will say, in terms of real life stuff, I think generally the term is used in terms of role, not in terms of actuality. I think it would be a straw man to argue that, like, at least of any of the big monotheistic faiths, that people actually believe that God is some sort of old man in the sky. It's definitely more of a immaterial thing that just so happens to be referred to as he and father because of roles played. But I won't get into that. I just wanted to mention that because I thought it was a really funny little comment. I'm not going to lie. But I do also think there's, of course this is all fiction. This is all fictional religion. But there's also stuff here that can be, I think, intentionally meant to also make you think about real life. So I think that's one where it's like, oh, kind of a little bit of a critique about a lot of religions, maybe. I'm not Philip Chase. But I do think it's in the same way as I've been listening to Philip Chase and AP Canavan talk about critiquing fiction and how I've tried to become better at that, because I definitely have been guilty in the past. I mean, there's not famous, but in between my little tiny audience I have, there's quite a funny little thing with me where I read a particular Star Wars book, which I felt like it wasted my time. And so the final book in the trilogy, I chucked across my room against my wall. And I've been made fun of quite a bit for it ever since then. But, I didn't really honestly critique it. I just kind of complained, But if that's what the author intended, then it's not really a flaw. It's just like I didn't personally enjoy something. So I've tried to be better at that. And also making sure that your critiques, what is the author intending? What does the text say? All that good stuff, Being a better reader. There's a whole playlist by AP Canavan. Really enjoyed it. But, so with that, I think it also applies to real life texts and whatnot. So, you have to critique within, so like, if somebody pulled out a cell phone in this book, I would consider that a flaw because the series hasn't established that as a possibility, right? But the magic and stuff, this is what the series has established, so it doesn't matter if the series is real or not, this is the rules that have been implemented by the world, so I can accept it. In the same way with religious texts or anything, even if they're fake, you critique it based on how it's being portrayed within the story, so with that. So, yeah, that's all I'll say there on that matter. I took too long on that. So the Torlanders come to Astrolad. We have Day versus Bledla. Day tries to take control of the dragons. He tries to tap into the elf's power. The elf takes control. He fails to take control of the dragons. He feels like a massive failure at this point. So Bledla, succeeds and also is vindicated in his faith because DayRaven failed. And Erd must sacrifice herself. And so then we lose Erd, which is really sad because I really liked her character. But, sacrifices must be made in dramatic storytelling. Then we have the boat escape, and I've never felt more like this dwarf in my entire life because then I got this flight coming up, and I felt just like him. I mean, I haven't had it happen yet, but I'm going to feel just like him. I'll be like, can I get on solid land, please, and thank you. But the boat scene was also pretty cool in terms of manipulating the waves to get them out of danger. It was really fun scene. And again, this is I said it before, but I am so bad at visualizing action scenes. Like you can say it word for word in extreme detail, and I'll read it and I'll understand what's happening, but I won't see it. Like pictures come up in your mind of stuff happening. Like it'll be like a business report to me. Like that's all. I'll be like, okay, so this person did this today. Okay, that's registered, but I'm not visualized. Like I can't say how much I appreciate the fact, and it's not like he's doing anything special necessarily. It's just like he is working with the wavelengths in my brain to get me to be able to see what he's writing, and so I was able to actually see that boat scene, and it was pretty cool. So thank you for that scene. King Vol and the Thaugs, and Orvendil. But King Vol is his cousin, because they end up meeting the Thaugs. There's also this big long song to learn of the Thaug mythology, which is actually pretty cool. I really liked how they implemented that. See, that was a bit more of a creative way of dropping exposition and lore, because they're stuck with these Thaugs for a bit, and so they like to sing. They're doing their thing. So that's just respect the customs, and so they're kind of singing this tale that kind of gives you a little bit of the lore, which I thought worked really well. We have 2 books in, this is my note, and DayRaven finally gets to meet Galdor. So that was something pretty cool. Arkenwald's also got quite a bit of a god complex, because, I think Arkenwald's probably the most evil out of everyone. Like, German, he's slimy, he's conniving. He has a gold mine, though. And I don't think he sees himself as the villain. Bledla has blind faith. He is fervently believing in this stuff, but he believes he's doing something for the good. He's not trying to be evil, even though he very clearly seems to be in many instances in this book. But then we have Archimald, who doesn't believe that this religion is true, but is more than happy to manipulate people into doing his bidding and making sure that he is raised up as this godlike status. Like, that's his plan. Like, once this is all said and done, he wants to basically elevate himself into like a prophet slash godhood to kind of convince people, oh yeah, by the way, yeah, actually God is living inside me and you all should worship me. Like, just ego and this like need to be the most important thing. It's just kind of, that's why he's the most evil to me, because not only does he not believe in the religion, but he's actively harming others for his own interest, knowing that it's all BS, or believing that it's all BS at least. And then one of the other hardest parts of the book, Queen is choked to death. Archimald plans on doing the down and dirty, the dirty tango with his wife. They get into an argument, and Archimald chokes her to death. And he honestly doesn't feel that choked up about it. He might be in denial. As he finishes getting dressed, he kind of says like, "Oh, honey, what do you think?" He goes, "Oh, right, she's dead. Never mind." But he doesn't seem too upset over it. But it was that scene and early on in the book with the village is probably like two of the toughest scenes I ever had to read. It was up there with a lot of scenes in Lazen, which again I hear that Baker's whole series of books is just awful like that. So it's gonna be really, because at least Steven Erikson and Philip Chase are like hopeful, but it was tough. And I did watch his discussion with Joanna and Jimmy and Murphy, and he said it was hard to write, and I can imagine. I mean, it'd be hard for me to try to write that down. Maybe when I was a teenager, when I wanted to be super edgy, I'd gleefully write it, just because I wanted to get an emotion out of people. Because it's all about doing the dark and depressing things to get people sad. Like, you just, But now it's like having to actually write that, especially because like, part of the writing process, like you kind of like, these are your babies, right? So like, having to do that to characters, like, it's rough. Also, Galdor has a bunch of wisdom in this book to give to Sequara and other characters. Also, a bit of representation. I'm not one that's gonna like boo that or shout its praises from the heavens, but I do think it's worthy of note. Just how it just is. It's not something that's particularly focused on heavily. I mean, it's there. It is a focus. He mentions it, but it's also not something that's like ends up being his entire character. Like, he has a whole character before this is even brought up. He's gay. He But I just like that there's a bunch of characterization of him before we even learn that fact. For a similar example, because there's people who, when The Last of Us came out, the TV show, a lot of people claimed a lot of people were bigoted for not liking a particular episode. I didn't like the episode for a particular reason. Now, in the video game, there's the same character in that video game who is still gay. However, in the video game, the character you play as and the little girl, they spend time with this guy, right? They go on an adventure with this guy. And you kind of learn through the adventure that he is this, and you help him do stuff, you survive some zombies, you go on your way, right? And then you leave to go on to the next part of the story. In the TV show, they don't do that at all. They skip out on the adventure entirely. They give us a whole episode dedicated to the character and his partner and the love that they shared. And they end the episode with the characters finding a note by him and taking his car or whatever. So at first I was like really like, yes, we're getting like backstory to this character before the episode where he shows up. But then an episode never came. So the issue wasn't that he happened to be gay. The issue was that I was really looking forward to that character interaction between the different actors, and I was denied that because he had died off screen. But him being that wasn't an issue. And in fact, when you play the game, he has so many fun interactions because he's kind of a cranky guy with Joel and Ellie, and it's a really fun interaction. And through it, you learn, because at one point you enter a building and you find this guy hanging, and it turns out that the guy hanging was Bill's partner. So, little things like that. And it wasn't like the focal point of the whole story. It was something that was important to his character, but he had a full personality beyond that. This is just a problem for any character when an author does it wrong. And this could be anything, like, oh, this guy's just the funny guy, or this guy is just the angry guy, or this guy's just a thief. Where they all become stereotypes. So this guy is gay, and that's like their whole thing. And I'm not trying to make this be like a whole thing. Like, I'm just saying, I think it's really cool that he happens to be so. And he also just is like a Yoda. He just espouses wisdom left and right, and he says a lot of poignant things in this book, which I thought were really cool. So I just want to give props to the nuance and complexity of that, and I think Philip Chase wrote that character very, very well. That was kind of my main point on that. I think I got a little sidetracked on that, but I'm just saying, because we spent like a couple 100 pages with him before I even learned that about him, and I loved him before I learned that, and I learned him after I learned that. It's not like I got turned off because of that. I just thought it was something worth bringing up, because, I don't know. I don't, I think Malazan also has those sort of characters, but I don't feel like they were given as much screen time as Galdor was given here. So, that's all. He seemed like a human being, I guess is just the point. Also, speaking of love, Sequara kisses DayRaven, and this is kind of where their romance truly begins. 1 second, I have to go find a page, because I wrote down a page number. Never mind. For some reason, I have 2 phones, if you don't know. Also, that is Karsa Orlong, don't mind that. But for some reason, it's not letting me open the book on my Kindle on this phone, only on this one. So I was going to read a beautiful section of writing, because I have 2 sections where I wrote down what Philip Chase wrote, but it won't let me, so unfortunately, never mind. Moving on from that, though, there's a funny little bet scene between Orvandil and Norn, because Norn has to fight one of the Thaugs, and it's just a funny little betting scene. But Orvandil does put all of his bet on to Norn, which is great. Norn also gives a speech about, the animosity between their 2 peoples, but how he is honored to fight by their side. And I didn't write it down, but it was a great speech. Really enjoyed it. Sildharan is quite stubborn, this whole place, because, Galdor warns them of what's coming, and they're kind of like, we got this, don't worry about it. It's so frustrating. Orvandil kills a dragon. Just straight up kills one. I was like, that's so cool. Because they've shown to be pretty, like, kind of like the nuclear bombs of the setting. Like, if you have a dragon, it's kind of like game over. Like, you win. But Orvandil manages to kill at least one of them, which is pretty cool. Then we get to sort of near the end of the book. At this point, DayRaven is kind of embracing the Elf Shard. He's finally figuring out everything, and so he goes to find the Mother of Dragons, Gorshad, and he tames her. But that whole interaction, their whole dialogue, everything in that scene, cinema. Just, I loved everything about that section. It was, I have no complaints. I wanted more. I can eat that up all day long. The dialogue in that section was beautiful. Just like everything from like the threateningness of her being like, you're nothing but a little speck of dust, and him like, yep, so what? You're still gonna do what I say. And there was no pride, or it was just like, no, this has to happen. This is going to happen. You will help me. I am you, and you are me. I am the Raven. I am this. Just like it was so well done. And I wrote down the page so I could read it to you, verbatim. But again, I didn't write it down, so that is unfortunately. I really wish I did though. Maybe I'll do a separate video of just that speech and put it up on YouTube. That might be kind of cool. I might do that. I like my day off. I might do that. Look for it would be a spoiler, but look for that scene that I might read out loud to you, because it's a really good scene. It's a really good scene. Also, really sad. We have Orvindil versus Edgul. Edgul being DayRaven's father. Now, it's not that I particularly feel bad for Orvindil necessarily, because I don't know how much of a relationship he had with Edgul. It's just more of the tragedy of, like, this is DayRaven's father, and there's heat of battle, and of course Orvindil has to take Edgul's life. So it's just really, sucks this had to happen. Also, the elf seems to completely take over DayRaven. And the whole thing, again, we still don't know too much about the elves, but they very much give off, in this book, once DayRaven is completely under control, it seems to be like, well, if all the problems in this world come from humans, well, then a simple solution is just get rid of the humans, which is seemingly what DayRaven starts to do under the control of the elf. However, Sequara saves him. Through love, through the connection, she brings him back. But that's another thing where, like, I think it works thematically. I just don't know if I really feel the romance. Because more of the reason, part of the thing that helps with saving him at the end is because, the first book she healed him, so they have this, like, this magical connection that is built up. And I can buy that. That's a logical enough reason for why she's able to get through to DayRaven. But the romance part, I don't know. I kind of just accept it because Philip Chase tells me to, more so than I actually feel and believe it. But, power of love, power of magic, whatever you want to say, she brings him back from the brink. Will that save him forever? DayRaven eventually, he ensues peace. Bloodla is defeated. Bloodla is then killed by Archenwald. Archenwald, well, under the threat of being burned alive, does promise to back off from the fight and heads back home. Of course, that's not the end, though. While the war of the Torlanders versus all of Emerland for this holy war may be over, the holy war is done. That is full stop. It's over. Conflict, though, is not over. There are multiple threads here that need to be concluded that are not through yet. There are people that throughout these two books, Archenwald had taken over, like, their homes, and they're not exactly sitting still while that's going on. You still have Munzil and his hatred for the Siltarans and his need for vengeance, so that's still a thread that needs to be carried through. So, and then we have Jaraman, who still wants to, attain power, so he's not through yet. So there are all these threads that, while the Holy War may be truly over, conflict and war is definitely not over. And so that is a thread to be followed through in the next book. I also didn't write down, but there was a section in the middle where Sequara saves a little girl, and my prediction is that the little girl on the cover of Return of Edan is that girl that Sequara saved, but that is just a theory, a game theory. Anyway, I know my thoughts are kind of scattered and all over the place. It was 700 pages, it is getting close to the length of, like, Deadhouse Gates, which was like 800 something pages, which I split into a two-parter because there was so much to discuss there, whereas I tried to do this all in one sitting. And this is no E&C Elsamont, mind you, because E&C Elsamont you can easily do. I feel like you can explain those books in a single video, but I feel like I do think that Philip Chase's is a step beyond, and it's kind of hard to properly address everything in this book in a single video, especially by yourself. I don't have all these discussions that he's had with other booktubers to really get that huge nuance and all the thematic beats throughout, and the different stuff with, like, Beowulf and stuff that just goes over my head until I watch, like, an interview discussion with him. But still, I think these are fantastic. I can read a book for fun, just for fun. Like, when I was reading Melazan, I just want to get through all the Halo books because like I like the Halo games. So but it was so hard to go from like Toll the Hounds to like some random Halo book where it's like beat by the numbers, kind of whatever, So I definitely like when my mind is stimulated. I definitely like when I'm challenged, especially, And I do have my preconceived notions and my my beliefs of the world. A lot of this book has to do with religion. I'm sure this will come up in following books as well. Um, I think I'm of a unique status in terms of my parents are the farthest thing from religious. They were never religious. I never grew up religious. I didn't pick up a Bible till like 7th or 8th grade. Never really cared. I'm not religious. Like, I wasn't. I became religious as I got older. And there was a time, like when I was 17 to 19, where I felt especially zealous. And I was so sure I was right. And I believed in everything I said. And I still do. But there's a bit of a difference now where life has hit me a bit more. I've seen people I care about die. I lost my grandma in 2024, which I wasn't particularly close to her, but still, I didn't get to say goodbye. I work at a retirement place. I have to deal with death a lot, especially these last 2 years. Lost somebody just like a month ago. Also, personally, it feels like a lot of high school drama now, but a lot of stuff in real life. They just kind of like. I hung out with a lot of people that were not religious. A lot of people that believe fundamentally opposed to things that I believe. And yet I felt the closest bonds with them out of anybody I've ever met. And then they left. And I won't get into that because it's my business. And I'm not getting that close with people on the internet. But all that to be said, over the course of living life, I feel like I'm a bit more nuanced in my approach. And, I would talk to people about religion and stuff just all the time. But now it's like, nobody cares what you have to say if they don't know you. If I'd rather become best friends with you, know you super well, and care about you deeply. And if you care what I have to say, you'll ask, right? I don't want to shove anything down your throat. That's kind of how I try to live it now. But all to say, this book deals with things, right, that, while it may not be about me or about things that I may believe or other people may believe, it is definitely a parallel to certain things. And so I appreciate that because I never want to be stuck in a bubble. I want to constantly be challenged on my beliefs because the more challenged I am on it, either I'll fall away, and that's okay. Like, if I leave it because I don't believe it anymore, then cool. But if I'm challenged and I feel like I'm stronger in it after the fact, then, I feel like that's validating, confirming, all that good stuff. Kind of getting way off topic from the point of the book, but I'm just saying these thoughts pop in my head while reading his books because his books actually make me think, they make me feel, and I really appreciate that when a work can do that, and I think it's a testament to Philip Chase's writing, and I know he's gonna watch this, and I appreciate that a ton, like genuinely, like I'm a random 24-year-old on the internet, in his childhood room, because he still doesn't live on his own yet, and talking about a book, and some successful man that could do other things at this time took the time to watch this. It's appreciated. I appreciate it a ton. Up next, though, we have Return of Edan by Philip Chase, which I absolutely positively look forward to reviewing and discussing and reading with all of you. So until next time, treat each other with kindness. And remember, I had a point to make. Just be kind. I think there's a lot of themes and things you can get from this book series and Malazan and all that, but I think definitely one is just to be kind to your fellow man. I think that is a constant throughout all these books. Not that it's like the core theme, but you definitely, so much bloodshed, so much death, and if people were just a bit more accepting of one another, we're able to coexist And that doesn't mean you have to agree with everybody on everything. But, you know, I can love you even if we don't like pizza. I like pizza. If you don't, that's okay. You know, like, we can both still exist together. I can still love you unconditionally. I can still take a bullet for you. We don't have to agree on everything. So yeah, just take that away. You know, just all this conflict could have been avoided. So we may not be able to change the world, but we can change ourselves individually. So let's try to be better people every day. And yeah, I'll see you with Return of Edan. Till then.